I pulled into my driveway in the heart of Silicon Valley, feeling the weight of a grueling 2-week business trip finally lifting from my shoulders. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across our modern craftsman home, its sleek lines and pristine landscaping a testament to the success I'd worked so hard to achieve. I couldn't wait to surprise Sarah with my news. The promotion to Chief Technology Officer would change everything. More money, more prestige, and most importantly, more time at home with my family. My Tesla's door closed with a soft thud as I grabbed my laptop bag from the passenger seat. The house looked exactly as I'd left it. Immaculate white exterior, perfectly trimmed hedges, and Sarah's Range Rover parked in its usual spot. A picture-perfect scene of Silicon Valley success. I approached the front door quietly, wanting to surprise her. The key slid smoothly into the lock, and I stepped inside our home. The familiar scent of vanilla and lavender, Sarah's signature candles, greeted me immediately. "Honey, I'm home early," I called out, setting my bags down in the foyer. No response. Strange. Her car was outside, and it was only 4:30 p.m. She usually worked from home on Thursdays. I loosened my tie as I climbed the stairs, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As I neared our bedroom, I could make out muffled voices and laughter. My brow furrowed. Who could she be talking to? I reached for the doorknob, but hesitated when I caught part of their conversation. "Oh, Ryan, you're terrible," Sarah's voice said, breathless with laughter. "What if Michael finds out?" A chill ran through me. "Ryan, my own brother." "As if that tech nerd would ever catch on," Ryan replied, his voice dripping with contempt. "He's too wrapped up in his precious algorithms to notice what's happening right under his nose." I stood there, paralyzed, as their conversation continued. "You're right," Sarah agreed, giggling. "It's almost too easy. The way he looks at me with those trusting eyes, it's pathetic." "Well, you've always been a convincing actress, babe," Ryan chuckled. "Remember how you cried when he proposed? That was Oscar-worthy." Their laughter hit me like a physical blow. My mind reeled, trying to process the betrayal unfolding before me. How long had this been going on? How could they do this to me? I wanted to burst in, to confront them, to demand answers. But something held me back. A cold, hard resolve started to form in my chest. No, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. In a daze, I retreated down the stairs, my movements mechanical and precise. I grabbed my laptop bag and a few essential items. My hand hovered over a framed photo of Sarah, Ryan, and me from last Christmas. Sarah was between us, her arms around both our shoulders, her smile radiant. All lies. A wave of disgust washed over me, and I left it behind. As I drove away, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckle, ES turned white. I swore to myself they would regret this. They thought I was just a naive tech nerd? Fine. I'd show them just how wrong they were. I checked into a nondescript Motel 6 on the outskirts of San Jose. My mind was racing with plans. First things first, I needed to disappear. Michael Anderson needed to cease existing. I spent the night hunched over my laptop, my skills as a software engineer proving invaluable. Moving money to offshore accounts, closing credit cards, erasing my digital footprint. By the time dawn broke, I had the framework of a new identity ready. Marcus Wright was born. As the first light of day filtered through the dusty motel window, I allowed myself a small, grim smile. Sarah and Ryan thought they had me fooled, but soon enough, their laughter would turn to ashes in their mouths. I'd make sure of it. The next few days were a blur of calculated moves. I withdrew cash in small amounts from different ATMs, bought a prepaid phone, booked a one-way ticket to New York under my new identity. But before I left California, I had one more stop to make. The private detective's office was in a shabby part of Oakland. Frank Martinez came highly recommended for his discretion and thoroughness. "I need everything," I told him, sliding an envelope of cash across his desk. Their communications, financial records, everything. And I need something else tested, I added, pulling out a strand of Emma's hair from my wallet. I'd taken it from her hairbrush that morning, acting on a horrible suspicion. Frank's eyes widened slightly at the implied request, but he nodded. It'll take time, he warned, and it won't be cheap. Money isn't an issue, I replied coldly. Just get it done. 2 days later, I was on a flight to New York. As California disappeared beneath the clouds, I felt a strange sense of liberation. Michael Anderson, the trusting husband and loving brother, was dead. Marcus Wright was rising from his ashes. And Marcus Wright had only one goal: revenge. New York welcomed me with its characteristic indifference. I rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, paying cash. Started laying the groundwork for my new life. My experience in tech and my savings gave me a solid foundation. I began attending tech meetups, networking events, building connections, learning the startup ecosystem. Within 6 months, I had my own company, Right Technologies. We specialized in cybersecurity and data analytics. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used the skills that Sarah and Ryan had mocked to build my empire. A year passed. Then two. Right Technologies grew exponentially. I was careful to stay out of the spotlight, but our success was impossible to hide. Series of funding came easily. Then Series B. The venture capitalists couldn't throw money at us fast enough. All the while, Frank kept me updated on Sarah and Ryan. Their perfect little world was starting to crack. Ryan's gambling habit had gotten worse. He was borrowing money from increasingly dangerous people. Sarah was struggling to maintain her lifestyle on a single income. Their relationship was showing strain. Good. Let them suffer. But the real blow came 3 years into my new life. Frank's DNA test results arrived in a plain envelope. I opened it with trembling hands. Emma wasn't mine. She had never been mine. I crumpled the paper in my fist, a cold fury washing over me. Sarah's betrayal ran even deeper than I had imagined. She hadn't just stolen my happiness. She'd stolen my fatherhood too. Enough was enough. It was time to turn up the heat. I began acquiring Ryan's debts through shell companies. One by one, I bought them all. He never knew I was his new creditor. Meanwhile, anonymous tips about Sarah's past indiscretions found their way to her employer. Her reputation began to crumble. Their perfect life was unraveling thread by carefully pulled thread. 5 years after my disappearance, Right Technologies went public. The IPO made headlines. Tech's newest billionaire, the mysterious Marcus Wright. I kept my face out of the papers, but my name was everywhere. Sarah and Ryan never made the connection. They were too busy dealing with their own problems. Ryan was drowning in debt. Sarah was facing professional ruin. Their relationship was toxic, poisoned by mutual blame and resentment. And I watched it all from my penthouse office in Manhattan. Every night, I would stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city that had given me my revenge. Sometimes I thought about Emma, the daughter I had loved who was never mine. But those moments of weakness were becoming rarer. The man who had loved her was gone, replaced by someone harder, colder, someone who understood that love was just another weapon to be used against you. 7 years. It had taken 7 years to build my new life, to position myself for the final strike. Now, as I stood in my office, watching the sun set over Manhattan, I knew it was time. Sarah and Ryan had no idea what was coming. They thought they had destroyed Michael Anderson. Instead, they had created Marcus Wright. And Marcus Wright was about to show them exactly what a tech nerd could do. The game was about to change, and I held all the cards. The first signs of my plan's success came faster than expected. Sarah's prestigious position at her consulting firm crumbled overnight. Anonymous emails detailing her past indiscretions found fertile ground. The board couldn't distance themselves fast enough. I watched through my network of informants as she cleaned out her office. Her designer handbag clutched close, mascara smeared from crying. Perfect. Ryan's downfall was equally satisfying. His gambling debts had reached a critical mass. My shell companies began calling in their markers. All at once. No mercy. No extensions. Please, he begged my representatives. I just need more time. They replied with scripted indifference, just as he and Sarah had been indifferent to my pain. From my Manhattan office, I orchestrated their destruction like a symphony. Each move precisely timed, each consequence carefully calculated. Emma, now 12, was showing signs of rebellion. Acting out at school, getting into fights. I felt a twinge of something, but I pushed it aside. She wasn't my responsibility. She had never been. Mr. Wright. My assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. Your 2 p.m. is here. Send them in. I replied, straightening my Brioni tie. The door opened, revealing a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit. One of Ryan's creditors. Mr. Wright, he stammered. We didn't know you were interested in such small-time operations. I smiled coldly. I'm interested in many things. Tell me about my brother's debts. His eyes widened at the word brother, but he was smart enough not to comment. Instead, he laid out the numbers. Ryan was in deep, deeper than even I had realized. Perfect. Buy them all, I instructed. Every last cent he owes. And then we wait. The pieces were falling into place. Sarah, unemployed and desperate, had started drinking. Ryan, drowning in debt, grew increasingly paranoid. Their perfect life was crumbling, just as mine had. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The DNA test results sat in my safe. A nuclear option, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came sooner than expected. Sarah, desperate and drunk, tried to contact me. She'd finally made the connection between Marcus Wright and her vanished husband. Her email arrived late one night. Michael, please. We need to talk. I read it with a smirk, deleted it without responding. Let her stew. Let her wonder. The next email came 3 days later. More desperate. More pleading. I saved them all. Evidence of her deteriorating state. Ammunition for what was to come. Ryan was next to crack, his bravado crumbling under the weight of his debts. He started asking questions about his mysterious new creditor. Too little too late. I watched through my surveillance as he paced his shabby apartment, a far cry from his former lifestyle. Mr. Wright. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. The private investigator's latest report has arrived. I opened the file eagerly. Photos spilled across my desk. Sarah, looking haggard, arguing with Ryan outside a bar. Emma, being escorted from school after another fight. Ryan, meeting with loan sharks in seedy locations. Their world was imploding, and I was just getting started. I picked up my phone. David, I spoke to my lawyer. It's time to move to phase 2. Are you sure? He asked. Once we start, there's no going back. I've been waiting 7 years, I replied. I'm done waiting. The legal documents were prepared within days. A civil suit against Sarah for fraud. Another against Ryan for embezzlement. All perfectly legal. All perfectly devastating. I made sure the papers were served during Sarah's job interview and Ryan's meeting with his parole officer. Maximum impact. Maximum humiliation. The news hit the local papers. Tech billionaire sues ex-wife for fraud. Silicon Valley success story takes dark turn. I watched their reputations shatter. Their futures crumble, just as they had shattered mine. Sarah tried to fight back. Hired a lawyer she couldn't afford. Claimed emotional distress. Painted herself as the victim. I almost admired her persistence. Almost. The DNA test results landed like a bomb in the courtroom. Sarah's face went white when they were presented. The judge's expression hardened. Even her lawyer looked sick. No further questions, Your Honor. The words echoed in the silent courtroom. Victory tasted sweet. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Ryan's turn came next. His gambling debts were called in simultaneously. All of them. He had 24 hours to pay. An impossible deadline. Just as I'd planned. I watched through my surveillance as he frantically made calls. Begged for extensions. Offered collateral he didn't have. No one would help him. I made sure of that. The mighty Ryan Anderson. Reduced to begging. Just as he'd reduced me to nothing. Sir tried to reach out one last time. A handwritten letter this time. Delivered to my office. Michael, please. For Emma's sake. I burned it without reading further. Emma was not my concern. Had never been my concern. The truth had freed me from that responsibility. The final phase was approaching. Everything was in place. 7 years of planning. Of waiting. Of building. About to pay off. I stood at my office window, looking out over the city I now owned. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. Appropriate. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. It's done. They've lost everything. I smiled. Phase 2 complete. Time for the endgame. Sarah and Ryan had thought they were so clever, laughing at the naive tech nerd. They weren't laughing now. The board meeting ran late that evening. Right Technologies was acquiring another startup, expanding our reach, building our empire. I barely paid attention. My mind was elsewhere, on the final moves of my game. Mr. Wright, my assistant called. There's someone here to see you. I knew who it would be before she said the name. Sarah Mitchell. I straightened my tie. Send her in. Time for the final act. The door opened, and there she was, 7 years older. A lifetime of regret etched on her face. Michael, she whispered. But Michael was dead. She was facing Marcus right now, and Marcus Wright showed no mercy. The endgame had begun. Sarah stood in my office, a shadow of her former self. Designer clothes replaced by department store bargains. Confident smile, now a trembling Lee. Annie, you've done well for yourself, she said, trying to sound casual. I remained seated, watching her squirm. What do you want, Sarah? She flinched at my tone. Cold. Dismissive. We need to talk, Michael. Marcus. I corrected her sharply. Michael Anderson is dead. You and Ryan killed him. Tears welled in her eyes. Calculated, probably. She'd always been good at crying on command. Please, she whispered. Emma needs help. She's in trouble. I laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. Emma is not my concern. But she thinks you're her father. Another one of your lies. I replied coldly. Her face paled. You know? I opened my desk drawer, pulled out the DNA results, tossed them across the desk. She didn't need to look. Her reaction told me everything. How long? I asked. How long were you and Ryan laughing at me? She sank into a chair, defeated. It wasn't like that. No. I stood, walking to the window. Then tell me, Sarah, what was it like? It just happened. Things just happened, I mocked. Like your job disappearing. Her head snapped up. That was you. I turned, smiling coldly. Everything was me, Sarah. Ryan's debts. Mine now. The lawsuits. Just the beginning. She stared at me, realization dawning. My God, she whispered. What happened to you? You happened, I replied. You and Ryan. We made a mistake, she pleaded. People make mistakes, Michael. Marcus. My shout made her jump. And this wasn't a mistake. I continued, quieter now. This was years of lies. Years of betrayal. Tears streamed down her face. Real ones this time, maybe. What do you want? She asked. Haven't we suffered enough? I laughed again. Suffered? You don't know the meaning of the word. But you will. My phone buzzed. Right on schedule. Turn on the news, I told her. She fumbled for the remote on my desk. The wall-mounted TV flickered to life. Breaking news, the anchor announced. Tech billionaire Marcus Wright acquires Harris Consulting, Sarah's former employer, and Anderson Investment Group, Ryan's workplace. Her hand flew to her mouth. You own everything now. I finished for her. Your past, your present, your future. Why? She whispered. Because I can. She stood on shaky legs. What about Emma? What about her? She's innocent in all this. I turned back to the window. So was I. Silence filled the office. Heavy. Suffocating. Get out, Sarah. Michael, please. Get out. I heard her heels on the marble floor. The door opening. Closing. I remained at the window, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed again. Ryan this time. Your brother is here, my assistant announced. Send him up. Time for the final confrontation. Ryan burst in minutes later. Wild-eyed. Desperate. You bastard. I turned slowly, savoring the moment. Hello, brother. He lunged forward. SECU. Righty appeared instantly, restraining him. You ruined us, he shouted. You destroyed everything. Funny, I replied calmly. That's exactly what you did to me. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Michael, the tech nerd, I confirmed, the one too wrapped up in his algorithms to notice. But I noticed Ryan. I noticed everything. He sagged in the security guard's grip. Why not just confront us? And give you the satisfaction? I walked closer. No, I wanted you to feel what I felt. The slow destruction of everything you hold dear. The helplessness. The despair. He looked up at me. Broken. What now? I smiled. Now. Now you leave. Leave the city. Leave the state. Never contact me again. And Ryan? He looked up. Remember this feeling. Remember that the brother you betrayed did this to you. Security dragged him out. I returned to my window. My empire spread out before me. Victory complete. Revenge achieved. Yet somehow, I felt nothing. 7 years of planning, of waiting, of building, all for this moment. And I felt empty. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Frank. Emma's in jail. Minor offense. I stared at the message. The daughter who wasn't mine. Another victim of Sarah and Ryan's lies. I typed a quick response. Bail her out. Anonymously. One last act of, not kindness, justice maybe. The sun was rising over Manhattan. A new day. For them, the end. For me, just another day at the office. Marcus Wright had won. Michael Anderson was truly dead. And somewhere in between, I was free. And